Fullmer from Vineyard. We have Eric Ellis from the Utah Lake Commission, and we have Brady Brammer, who is a distinguished state representative. Did you like that, Brady? So, and all four of them have knowledge on Utah Lake that can be helpful today in our discussion. I think I'm supposed to sit down for this. It's supposed to be kind of a more casual thing, so that's what I'm going to do. But I've been thinking about this breakout session for quite some time. I've been out of the country for a month, and so I've had a chance to kind of ponder what we're going to do today. And I remember I first ran for public office in 1994. Had no idea what I was doing. Maybe some of you can relate. Maybe, Eric, you can't, but maybe someday. And one of my campaign pledges was to improve Utah Lake for the citizens. Yeah, 1994. And I didn't win, but certainly had a wonderful time and then ran several other times and got elected a few times. But this has been an issue for a long time. In fact, I think it's been an issue since before the pioneers even came to the valley, when Native Americans were here and using it for their food source and other things. And so this is something that's been around for a long time and will continue to be an issue for a long time. But the real thing that we need to be discussing today is, where do we go? What do we do? And so anyway, I think I'll just ask that question. Let's just go down the road, take a couple of minutes, and just talk a little bit about your thoughts on this wonderful resource that we have. We've got mountains on the east, and we've got that lake on the west. Just ruminate for a couple of minutes and just kind of tell us your thoughts, and we'll move into what we're going to do about it after that.
So I guess I'm starting because you're making eye contact with me. Well, thanks. This is such a great topic, and it's been front of mind for years, just like you said. I remember as a teenager growing up, we would go water skiing at Utah Lake. My friends all had boats. We didn't. And then there was a big push, and we all bought T-shirts that said "Ski the Scum." And we were so proud to wear those. And we didn't even really talk about it other than it was a cool T-shirt and we all wore it. But you got to remember, that's when Geneva was pumping away and the lake was a different lake at the time. Looking at it now, it's so critical to Provo. We are the second largest. We have 9.7 miles of beachfront property on it. And whenever I'm out and about in the community or out of state or out of the country, bragging about where we live, I pitch it the same way. We live in this beautiful, unique place where there's beautiful mountains, a lush valley, and it rolls right into a beautiful lake. And Utah Lake, in the future, and now even, should be the gem of Utah Valley. It's always been a bottom feeder lake, and as you stated, right out of the gate, we pull from, we can go way back up into Strawberry and Jordanelle and Deer Creek and down to Utah Lake. And so it kind of gets a little bit of tugging before the water gets down to us. But with all the science that we're putting into it right now, and with the legislature on board now and funding behind it, I have great expectations for where this lake is going to go and what we're going to be able to do. We want it to be the gem of Utah Valley, and we want it to be a top recreation draw, spring, summer, and winter. I remember when there was an ice skating rink down there. It's just an amenity that has been quiet for a minute. So we really need to get to work and get it back up to speed where it was.
That's great. It's hard to add to everything that you said, but I think just echoing the words that you said, this lake has been serving people for centuries and gathering all sorts of life to this area. And so we're constantly reassessing, re-looking at our situation and saying, what can we do now to preserve something that's so essential and so important to us? Vineyard has about 3 miles of lakeshore property, but it's all public access. And so it gives us this different insight where people really get to become active and interact with the lake at all these different levels. And so what does it mean for recreation? What does it mean for conservation? How do we start to kind of share that space as we take care of it and also utilize it? And just to echo what you said, Mayor, I feel like we're at this point where we're all looking at it again and we're saying, okay, how do we get everybody in the room together? Our economic drivers, our conservationists, the people that are over the algae blooms, the people that are down there skimboarding down by the lake, just everybody, the municipal governments, our reclamation plants, everybody that is contributing or taking away something from the lake, what are we doing to give back and rebuild? And I think we're at that moment, just with the Utah Lake Authority that was formed, where we're saying, let's get our heads together, let's start focusing in, let's put money at this, and let's make a change. And I think that's where we are right now.
You both are difficult to follow because you've stated some really awesome things about the lake and why we love it. Just over
Eat the mic.
All right. Just over the fall months, I had a chance to be up in the mountains, just on the Wasatch Front, up on Timp, and looking down at the valley. It reminded me of why I love Utah Lake so much. It's gorgeous. It's an enormous lake. I moved from the Pacific Northwest, where I was surrounded by water, And one of the things that we don't have much of here in Utah is water, and moving to a valley that has the third largest lake west of the Mississippi is a pretty exciting opportunity to have this huge, immense natural resource right at our doorstep. And when I arrived here and started using the lake and water skiing and jet skiing around in the lake with whatever old machine we could round up, it was interesting to hear the remarks of friends that were from here that were surprised that we were down at Utah Lake using it. And I thought, clearly you haven't been out on the lake. It is amazing out there. It's gorgeous. The views are amazing from the lake, and then the water itself is awesome. Over the years, I've discovered that there's some work to be done on Utah Lake. It has had some human impacts over the last century plus that probably require some human intervention to reverse some of those issues. And so it has been an honor to pick up where others have contemplated solutions in the past and start to roll some of those solutions out on the lake over the last few years that I've had a chance to work on it.
Well, I think one of the main things that that everyone agrees on is that Utah Lake is full of unrealized potential. It's not what it could be. Now, as far as how do you get enough resources to help it be what it can be, that's really the hard part. And then making decisions on where you want to go from a public policy standpoint. And so getting a lot of local input is going to be essential, and getting those resources. And the way that you get resources into an environmental asset is by having people care about it, by having them interact with it, by having them recreate on it. And so the more that we can drive people into using the lake in productive ways and enjoyable ways, that's going to drive the improvement of the lake. And so it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg issue, but what I see is we need to help people fall in love with Utah Lake. And there is a lot to love about that lake. And as we do that, then you start to get more and more resources to continue the improvement of the lake so that we have just the asset that it can be, because it could be so much more than it is.
It's a great way to start. So let's brainstorm together. What would we like to see with Utah Lake? I mean, we don't have to go into detailed responses, but Mayor, instead of ski the scum, is there something better on the t-shirt?
That was a really cool t-shirt, so easy. We were all so proud of it. We just want it to be an accessible recreation draw for the whole valley, for when visitors, I mean, it's got the potential. We start talking about it at our office, and we're talking beachfront and tree houses that you stay overnight and amenities just through the roof. I mean, you start looking at what they can do nowadays, and it's just creative and forward-thinking, and we really care about it because with our new airport terminal, if you've flown out of Provo, you know when you're coming back from California, those planes drop right down and come right across Utah Lake and then land in the Provo airport, and it's beautiful. So we're excited to follow the science and get going on this. There's a couple things when I think of Utah Lake, just because we go down there, and just as a citizen of Provo, I hate all the mosquitoes and bugs, and I hate the carp. I'm so sick of those guys. They pop up their heads and they're like as big as a dog, and you just think, I really don't want you to like grab my toe or something.
Okay, so accessible for the public.
Accessible.
Recreation.
Absolutely.
Fewer mosquitoes and fewer carp. I think that's a good start.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yes.
Mayor Fullmer, how about you?
You know, and I'll just say we definitely want to see the recreation. We see that in our boardwalk. We want to see the conservation. But I think when we're looking out to the lake too, we're thinking, you know, the invasive species, it'd be great to see our native plants come back it'd be great to see a robust ecosystem inside of there. I mean, Mayor's talking about the carp. It would be great to see all of the creatures that have kind of gone from the ecosystem that really drive getting rid of the algae or whatever it is that's been stopping it from being accessible to come back, and what does that look like? And then just, I'll say it again, just accessible in many ways, robust fisheries, the things that gives it life to everybody that comes down to the lake, whether it's animals, whether it's people, how are you engaging with the lake, and just different ways to interact and different ways to see it thrive. Life back at the lake, right?
Great.
This is a great question, because the more we think about what we want this lake to be, the more I think we can make it a reality. As Representative Brammer pointed out, the more we can get people to fall in love with it, the more attention it gets, and the more we can actually implement projects. As we've gone through the Utah Lake Water Quality Study, it seems as though one of the most sensitive users or beneficial users of the lake are us humans. Fish and shorebirds are pretty resilient to the condition that the lake is in. But if we can make Utah Lake a hotspot for recreation and bring it up to that level that people are more comfortable with using, our fisheries thrive, our ecosystem thrives. We make it a place where people love to be, and as they fall in love with it, that puts the attention necessary to make sure that we have these large sections of wetlands that are restored and thriving, so that people have a place to go observe birds or be part of that ecosystem. And I think that needs to be our goal. Figure out how to get people down there on a regular basis, enjoying it, find locations like we're going to see here shortly at Vineyard, where folks have an opportunity to have restaurants out near the shoreline and actually see this lake and go, oh, this is so much more beautiful than I've been hearing for decades. And as that kind of perception improves, I think that we're going to see the needed attention to make improvements and make it the place that people want to be visiting regularly.
And I would echo what they've said, but I have a little different spin on it. I'd like to see us treat the lake as a feature and not a defect of our valley. And what I mean by that is, when I go down to the Linden Marina, it's all industrial zoning. And it's like an extension of the North Point transfer station, which is our city dump, essentially. Okay? And so I don't want to go down to the lake and drive through areas that feel like rail yards, vestiges of Geneva Steel, and other areas that don't feel comfortable and don't feel like you're going somewhere to have a great time. So I'd like to see the city step up and do their zoning in a way that treats the lake as a feature, where it is connected, where we have trails all the way around. And we're working hard on the trails, and we're making a lot of progress on that. But I'd like to see that, as you start to have that draw and you start to zone to where the way that you build out a city, the development that is coming, is built out in a way that treats the lake as a feature, you start to have the economic drivers that give you better facilities around the lake. The bathrooms around the lake are pretty terrible. People don't want to go down to the lake because the bathrooms are gross, and they're hot, and they're kind of like the out in the middle of the nowhere bathrooms. You know, the facilities can be improved so that it's more inviting to people. The marinas can feel better. They can feel like maybe your boat isn't going to run across the bottom of the lake. You know, you've got some of these boats that are hundreds of thousands of dollars now, and they won't put them into Utah Lake because they just feel so insecure going in and out of the marinas. There's little things like that if we can make it accessible and make it the feature that it is, those economic drivers will snowball to allow us to improve the lake.
Well, and not only that, and I hope I can jump in here, but if you're looking at it as a feature, then the water management, what you're putting into the lake, the non-point sources that you're adding to it, all of that begins to change and mutate with the way that you see and affect the lake, with our reclamation, with our zoning, with our agriculture.
And I would say this, both Vineyard and Provo have been on the forefront of that zoning change and that perspective on zoning. And I think the other cities are following suit. I think they want to do that. But we probably need to do some things to give them help on getting the right incentives so that they can attract the developers that will develop in a way that is lake friendly.
Great discussion. I just came back from South Africa, and I was in Cape Town, and the first day I was there, they took us on a tour of the fort that used to be the defense of the city, and it was it was like downtown. It was away from the wharf and away from the water. And I said, well, what have you done this used to be on the water. And they said, well, we've reclaimed the land. And they've done that, of course, in the Netherlands. They've done that in many places. But they built a brand new mall on there. They have a boardwalk now. And if you go down to the water's edge, you're in this thriving nightlife with all sorts of stuff going on. So as I was sitting there watching what they had done, and I was experiencing their mall and their restaurants and everything, I thought, do you think Utah Lake could be like that someday? Do you think we could have it as a destination where people want to come in the evening and have our own boardwalk maybe, and our own place where we want to go as members of our community, and when the tourists come, they want to go there too? Now that might be a little too grandiose, I don't know, but Eric, you're in charge of this thing. Tell us what you think.
One of the most amazing things about Utah Lake is that it is, as I mentioned earlier, it's enormous. There's 75 miles of shoreline on Utah Lake. That means that we can have large swaths of land that are preserved perpetually to be wetlands or to be lowlands that support shorebirds and such. And then we can have some areas on the lake that meet what you're looking for. We've got a mix of that on a wetland piece that we're working on right now that will have a boardwalk out near the lake shore. We've got sections along the shoreline of Vineyard and Provo and Saratoga Springs that have huge potential for kind of creating that amenity. We've been working on a shoreline plan in Vineyard for the last 2 years now that has some really cool, not just boardwalk, but piers that come out in and over the lake that will be right adjacent to some thriving retail and restaurant type environment. So I think that it does have that opportunity. It'll just be, my expectation is it'll be speckled around the shoreline in key locations so that it really can have that draw, but doesn't necessarily mean that the whole lake becomes that, but rather just these nice little locations of concentrated development.
I just want to speak to another project that's been going on. We've been working on this project out there for, I think, 5 years, but the Delta Restoration Project is a huge project and beautiful, and the conservation component and the education component. I mean, as children, we probably all recall going on field trips all the time, and now the kids hardly go on field trips. But the whole point of our Delta Restoration Project that we've been working with the federal government, besides restoring the June sucker and bringing back our native plants and encouraging people to come and be educated down there, is for the children of the valley. We want them to come and be educated about Utah Lake. And I remember I was back in DC and talking to a representative, and he said, if I hear the word June sucker one more time, I'm going to lose it. I'm like, June sucker. Because we really are trying to figure that out. And I think our Delta Restoration Project just is going to be phenomenal. We're so close to that opening up and being ready to go. It's got beautiful boardwalks. It's got lookouts. It's got for the native bird component. It is going to be a really impressive, just like Eric was stating, nugget to our entire Utah Lake.
Well, and I think what you're really hitting on, in order for it to become a feature like that, it just has to have those connectivity points. You know, you have the ability to go down to this area that Mayor's talking about, engage and interact right in this area, learn about what's there, engage with the lake. And Eric was talking about our our transit-oriented development that takes you right from the front runner, connects you down to a promenade and brings you down to the beach, and you can go and actually interact. And it's because of those connections that draw you in, and you're clearing this area that allows people to engage with the lake that makes it so accessible. And I think as we can focus on that and really build on what Brady was saying with looking at as a feature and saying, how do we make those connection points? How are we driving that? If you're a farmer and you're having, an orchard right by the lake, how are you connecting with the lake? What is it that you are doing to interface and make that a feature in the valley? And I think that's something we all need to focus on. And whether you're learning it at the Provo Bay kind of area, whether you're learning about it at an institution, whether you're coming down and you're just engaging because you're skimboarding, what is it that we can give back and start making those connection points at a policy level, at a municipal level, and then at an individual level and property owner level?
So I think the question was, can we have a wild nightlife in Utah County?
No, that's one way of saying it.
I think we have to look at the past a little bit. Before Saratoga Springs was a city, it was a resort on Utah Lake. And it was a resort that was a travel destination that people loved because of the natural benefits of Utah Lake. And so is the potential there? Absolutely. We've already seen it in the past. And I think that as we continue this process of connecting it, I mean, if you were to look at the state of Utah as you kind of have two infrastructure backbones down the middle of the state, or at least through the Wasatch Front. You've got I-15, which provides an infrastructure background, and you've got Front Runner, which provides an infrastructure background. That happens to run right next to Utah Lake. And that is a really positive benefit for the lake. And it becomes an economic driver, and that's going to allow for that transition into where we can start to integrate some of the change and the reception of population that we anticipate receiving in a way that that doesn't put the lake off to the side, but instead features the lake as a central organ for the lifestyle and the economy of Utah.
Can I add one thing to that? There's a couple of things that I've discovered over the last 7 years working with the Utah Lake Commission and now the Utah Lake Authority. And one of those is that communities are looking for ways to develop their amenities for residents and constituents, and they have limited resources to do that. And so when we can bring grants or any form of additional funding to the table, it has been a phenomenal way to get those communities to, instead of spending every dollar that they have on a dollar per dollar basis on a park that's in the center of town, if we can leverage out those dollars and say, hey, if you put this project down on the lake, we can match that 50-50 or whatever the match might be, and all of a sudden that becomes the priority. And so it has been interesting to see these communities refocus on the lakeshore simply because we've been able to pull some grants from here, or pull some grants from over here, and all of a sudden we've got a new marina on the north end of the lake. We've got Saratoga Springs planning this amazing resource that will capitalize on some of the warm springs over on the west side of the lake and bring tourism down. And so we've got a county tax, the tourism tax, that enables some really good grants to bring dollars down to the lakeshore. And I think that if we continue to kind of incentivize work being done on the lake, it becomes the open door that mayors and council members are looking for on finding ways to give back to the community that's funding these through their taxes.
One of the common themes that has come out in the conversation today is it being a connectors, that type of thing. Let's talk for a minute about the bridge over Utah Lake. There have been bridges proposed for decades. I When I was on the Provo City Council, Mayor, we had people coming to us. They were sure they had funding, and they were going to build a bridge over Utah Lake. We've been hearing about that bridge now for decades. So what will it take to get that connectivity? Because we're rapidly getting development all around that lake, and the ability to go over it instead of around it can really create a more efficient transportation system for our valley. So let's talk about that. What would it take to get a bridge over Utah Lake?
I sit on many boards with many of these people, and just like you were stating, right out of the gate, I think 5 years ago, one of my first big meetings was someone coming in about the road across the lake. And as a child growing up, I remember hearing it in Provo, and I've seen as many as 3 potential connecting roads across Utah Lake at various spots. I don't know if I've become cynical or just kind of like, well, we've heard it before, right? I just think the lake is so beautiful. And just on a personal note, I'm just not ready to run a street across it. I just don't love that yet, unless someone can convince me. Again, I don't have all the powers because this whole lake project is all about collaboration, as you can see, with multiple entities. I was telling my staff the other day, I was coming off the top of a mountain and I looked down and kind of paused because as a child growing up in Provo, there was no lights over there, right? And through the years, it's been fascinating to watch as the sun sets. The lights are just slowly moving. Now they're almost where I live, and when I'm up in the canyons directly across from me, and I only know it's going to keep moving that way. So I'm sure that this topic will keep coming up and potentially get legs and become a point of discussion. But like you stated, I've heard from one connecting coming into Provo Center Street, which we were like, wait, we can't handle that much traffic, to 3 different various connectors across the lake. And then again, like I stated, I look at Utah Lake and think it's just so beautiful. And personally, I don't know if I want to look down and see a bunch of car lights going back and forth across it. That'll be a huge conversation to have.
I'll just take it from a different standpoint, just the logistics of what you're asking. So I think there's quality of life and what people are hoping to see and engage in, but then there's just what do we need as far as infrastructure across the entire state, and where are we on getting that funding? And there's so many corridors that have to be, and main arterials that have to be paid for, expanded, brought around the lake. That's not even going through the lake. And we're out like 5-10 years on those dollars at the state level. So I imagine that focusing and prioritizing something like a road across the lake is going to take a little bit of time when it comes to actual monies. But just growing up in a place that had so many lakes, you go out to the Midwest and there's lakes everywhere. And every lake has like 3 or 4 bridges crossing it. And it's just kind of part of life. When you start to grow and you become this, what are we pegged to have, another 1 million people in Utah County? When you start to bring life around a lake, people want to cross it. And so it becomes an easier topic of discussion. And where we're not at that point yet, because there's so much open land and it's so vast right now, it's probably where it becomes legitimate, and where the mayor is talking about is on the long-range plan, and that's where she keeps seeing, you see it through Provo Bay, or you see it down at the south end, or you see it directly coming into 8th North in Vineyard, and I'm like, how are we going to manage that kind of traffic coming right in from Saratoga? But that's where those conversations start happening, is saying, how do we make those connection points? Will they come in the future? And right now, they're on the long-range plan. And we say, if we do experience the growth, where do we have to build those bridges in order to move people throughout the valley? But I think that's kind of where it has legs, and I think it'll be some time, and maybe you guys have different thoughts on it, but I think that's that's as far as we can go right now.
I don't know. In the last 6 months or so, I was in a meeting with UDOT, and everybody's aware of I-15 and just how busy it is. And UDOT pointed out that currently, about in Spanish Fork, we see something like 160,000 trips per day on I-15. And this was part of their discussion, was that they were talking about this bridge idea, and that they have now incorporated that into their 30-year plan, their 30-year funding plan, and that somewhere between now and 30 years out, they're forecasting a demand for vehicle trips per day from the west side of the lake to the east side of the lake at about 130,000 trips per day. And so when you envision the constant stream going north and south through Spanish Fork today, and you have almost that much demand in less than 30 years, it will likely become not just an idea or a convenience, but there will be enough of a demand that we figure out how to make that work, or figure out some solution to addressing that vehicle traffic that's clogging up, Pioneer Crossing or the near future Pony Express Trail extension. There's just going to be a high enough demand that we're going to have to come up with a solution that might be that.
So when you look at development across the Wasatch Front, you have to look at how much available developable acres are in each of the different counties. So if you go to Davis County, they've got about 45,000 developable acres. You go to Salt Lake County, they've got about 55,000 developable acres. And when you go to Utah County, it's about 255,000 developable acres. So if you look at the future population growth, it's going to go to where there is available land, which is largely in Utah County along the Wasatch Front. And most of that land, there's a good pocket down in South Utah County that will develop pretty quickly, and then you've got everything that we're already seeing developing very rapidly in Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs area. And so we're seeing all that population come in on the west side of the lake, and so as you consider whether whether there would be a crossing across the lake, you're looking at, number one, is there a demand? And as that demand on the west side of the lake naturally happens with people moving in there, it creates a demand to get to the Provo Airport. It creates a demand to get to UVU, to get to BYU, all of that will drive a demand and a desire to have an east-west crossing along that area. Now you also have to look at whether it will pencil environmentally, okay? And that's a complicated subject. But we have thousands of lakes with bridges across them in the United States, and there are ways to put a bridge across the lake. There are also things you can do to mitigate. There may be an opportunity to put tunnels under, or there may be something where you could do a cover so that you don't have headlights coming over, and it protects it from some of the there's going to be some unique things with snow and wind on a lake like that. And then the next thing is, does it pencil economically? Now, you don't have to purchase all of the corridor. So oftentimes when you do a larger road project, you're buying through eminent domain properties, and that's quite expensive. In this case, you wouldn't be doing that, but you're dealing with a lot of environmental issues. And oftentimes on a lake like this, you're looking at what's called a P3 development, which is a public-private partnership where there's a toll road or something like that. And so you're balancing whether the demand is there, whether it pencils environmentally, and whether it pencils fiscally. And once you get all three of those, then you start to, then there's some movement. Now, it's currently on the long-term plan in the 2040 to 2050 time frame. It's on UDOT's plan. Now, that doesn't mean that it's something that absolutely happens, but it means that they're looking at the demand, and they're saying that that's about the time frame when that starts to hit. But those are going to be some tough decisions, and they're going to be some decisions that balance a lot of competing interests. But I think that we're up for the challenge for making that decision as we get closer to it.
I've learned a great deal just from that little tidbit of discussion. What spoke to me the most was Mayor Kaufusi saying, I just want to see the beauty of this lake become all it can become before we start dotting it with bridges. and then the concept that planning for the future is really what we're all about here at this Growth and Prosperity Summit. So a focus on quality and then an eye to the future is really what we have to do. But thank you very much. I have a technical question that I've been wondering for many, many years, and I've been told this over and over again, and it goes something like this. Dredging the lake, because it's so shallow, is hard to do because of the natural geographical features. And you can dredge it, and then there's silt that will just come settle very, very quickly. And so there's some sort of continuous dredging that has to take place. Now, it may just be an old wives' tale, but now that I've got Eric Ellis sitting here with a microphone, maybe he can shed some light on that for us and tell us what the possibilities of getting a deeper lake that has the ability to not have so much algae and not have so much, to have more usability.
Well, you had a very narrow question, and then at the last second threw a much broader one in there. But from the feasibility of dredging the lake, let's say just to remove a certain portion off the bottom, sedimentation is not the problem that I've heard over the years that, oh, we've probably gotten 8-9 feet of sedimentation since settlement, pioneer settlement. But in fact, there's only been 30 centimeters, a foot. And so if we were to pull 2 feet off the bottom of the lake and have a place to put it, presumably you would put it in the lake so that you didn't just drop the lake 2 feet deeper into the valley bottom. We don't expect that it would backfill very quickly. When we dredge, what we've been up against is that we have dredged marinas or we've dredged up by the Jordan River pump house repeatedly because the lake is very good at shifting the soft sediments that are there back into the locations that you've just dredged on a very isolated basis. And so the pump house every few years has to re-dredge to make sure that they have access to enough water to satisfy those northern water demands. So from a feasibility standpoint, if you were to dredge the entire lake, I think that it would make a permanent change to the depth of the lake. You really need to keep, as I mentioned earlier, I would stress, you need to figure out a way to put it back into the lake. That, I'm not going down the road of the Islands project per se, but the principle there was something that we've worked with them on, and that is that you just can't shrink the shoreline because you destroy wetlands. You have to displace the volume that you're creating. If we go down that road to make a deeper lake, you need to find a place to put it in the lake so that you don't just end up with a lower basin that's kind of eliminated the beneficial uses of our shoreline.
Any other comments? We've got about 10 minutes, and I'd like to leave at least 5 minutes or so for a question or two from the audience. But maybe we could just kind of sum up just your thoughts as we're finishing up our portion of this. Mayor?
Thank you. I think probably when I think about what's going on right now and sum it all up, it's energy. There is energy around the lake. And I know as we've met as mayors, we do a mayor's huddle where we all talk and collaborate together. The lake is a topic. We're all energized and we want to make it an amenity that serves the whole valley, including the tourism. We all lift when tourists come in and spend money in our communities. And so anything we can do to impact our economic opportunity is significant to every single municipality that is around the lake. At the same time, we have to be so cautious about the conservation and the wildlife and the wetlands, because that's what is Utah Lake. The last thing I would want to see is this huge commercialized nightmare down there, because that's not what Utah Lake is. Utah Lake is this beautiful, natural amenity that's been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I think we can do things that will stay true to the science and benefit. But at the same time, I'm probably the mayor that's pulling the reins a little bit on too much commercialization down there. And maybe the next Provo mayor will want nothing but commercial amenities down there. But this mayor wants to be really smart in what we do with this lake, because I've been here a long time and I've seen it go through a lot of cycles, and we just want it to be a gem for us and our children and our grandchildren and anyone that comes to Provo.
I love the idea of energy, and I will add to it by saying collaboration. I think as we all get in the room and we make decisions together, we are going to find a center of balance. And I feel like just on a microcosm of what could happen, that's what we did with our shoreline. Is we got everybody in the room and we came up with, you know, hundreds of acres of conservation, an incredible boardwalk that brings life to our transit-oriented development, a walkable area that preserves those wetlands along our beachfront, our lakeshore front, and just providing something that we can all sit in the room, work together, and say, okay, we're going to focus on it, we're going to put funding towards it, and we are going to look towards the future of it. Whatever it looks like, we're going to design it together, and we're going to come up with an idea that works for Utah Valley, and we're going to design it and shape it the way we all want to see it. That's what we do in municipalities. That's what we've done in Utah. That's what the secret sauce of Utah is, and we're going to do it here with Utah Lake. So.
We're at an interesting point in time. The Representative Brammer at the most recent legislative session created the Utah Lake Authority, created the framework for that, and then said, okay, you know, roll that out and make sure that we don't miss anybody and make sure that we are comprehensive in our approach to resolving the issues that Utah Lake faces. So we're looking forward to this opportunity to work with everyone in the valley, all the interest groups, get good feedback from our experts. When I listened to Tammy Pfeiffer's presentation today, and she talked about this dignified book, I thought, I'm reading that before we enter into this planning process, because having worked on the lake and for 7 years, I've come to recognize that it doesn't matter what we do. There are winners and losers on the outcome of what we try to accomplish, and we're trying to accomplish what is best for the lake, what is best for the community. But there are opinions across the board on how we accomplish that, and I really would like to focus on the positive, that this is a phenomenal opportunity that we have to make some progress on restoring that lake to become what we would all like it to be. And hopefully we can simmer that down to something that's very doable.
So Utah Lake is a unique natural resource because it is in the middle of a significant population base. And as a result, we have to treat it a little differently than some others that we may, we may want, Pittsburgh Lake is up by me in American Fork Canyon. That's going to have a different way of treatment than Utah Lake, where there's people there and there's more coming. And as we look at the lake, everyone is always saying restore. But that word doesn't mean a lot because we don't know what we're restoring it to necessarily. And there's been some interventions that have happened with the introduction of carp and others that may make it so that it's not possible to restore, nor do we know which time period in time we're restoring it to. And so what I would say is, as we look at the policy for Utah Lake, we need to recognize that the people are here and more are coming, and we need to improve the lake so that that interaction allows them to enjoy the natural resource to the greatest extent possible and protects that natural resource in a really positive way. And it's a unique opportunity that we have to take on. And so I guess I look at it as, the idea of Utah Lake is we need to improve it as much as we can, given the future that we know that it has with our population.
Okay, we have 3 minutes to go. Do we have any questions? Okay, see one at the top.
A stream running into Lake Tahoe is a wonderful tourist and educational feature called the stream chain.
So that was more of a statement than a question, but we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Eric, Lake Tahoe, just put it on your list of things to look at.
Done.
Okay. Next question. Yes.
It's my understanding that the two contamination factors of the lake have been Geneva and then farms surrounding the lake with their cattle going to. Is the lake getting cleaner?
Eric, yes or no?
Yes, the lake's
Thank you.
getting cleaner.
Thank you very much. Okay, next question. Right here.
Just listen to you. Is it a branding problem, or is it truly like an environmental, all the other issues? Because it just, to me, there's quite a bit of these.
Yeah, okay.
And you use it for just
Yeah.
branding
So is
It
it
is
branding or is
mixed.
it environmental? What do you think, Mayor? Let's just go right down there.
I think it is. We need an education component, and we need to push out that education campaign. Everybody that has maybe came to BYU in state or was born and raised here or just, landed here for a job 3 years ago, all of those ideas and the branding of the lake are very different. So I think the collaboration, the unification of getting around the lake and then pushing out an education campaign is where we need to land on it.
Mayor Fullmer?
Yeah, it's definitely both things. There's ways that we need to connect to the lake, and then there's things that we need to fix about the lake. That's why we have competitive grant programs coming in to try to get out some of the nutrients. We have invasive species. We have an ecosystem that's not there, that they're trying to restore. So it's both,
Any more questions? Last question. Yes.
We've talked a lot about things that we need to do. The lake's been an issue for a while. Can you address some of the things that have been done and how that's impacted or changed?
Okay, can we get like a 30-second from you, Eric?
Yeah, two biggest things that have been done: carp removal down to 75% reduction in what it was back when the project began, and then Phragmites, which is the invasive species around the shoreline that kind of choked it out for anyone to enjoy. That project's been going on for 9 or 10 years, and we've seen about a 70% reduction in Phragmites. Almost everywhere around the lake now, you can see the lake from wherever you are. We just need to stay on top of that, and likewise keep maintenance on the carp so that it doesn't come back and create the problem that it was historically as well.
So I'd just like to thank our panelists today. Let's give them a round of applause, and thank you very much. On the way out, we get some great cards.
people, and in so being, they know what the issues are. They hear it every day. They live among their community, and people know where they live, they know their number, and they're not shy. They're more than happy to share their insights. So today we're going to go ahead and start off, and I want to lead out with the first, which is kind of, it's at the end, but I want to start off with maybe what the toughest thing is. As mayors of your city, what is the number one challenge that you are dealing with in your community? And let's start with Mayor Westmoreland.
Okay, I did not prep this microphone. It should be on. Is on? Is it working? No. Okay, then maybe it's not powered on. Okay. Hopefully not. Where is it? Okay, should I just use yours? Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Yeah, I think this is working. Well, in Eagle Mountain, obviously growth is a big issue, and so keeping up with that growth, the number one most expensive is infrastructure of all kinds, whether it's water, roads, sewer, you name it. Because even if you've solved it up to today, then you've got the growth that happened today to deal with tomorrow. So it's an ongoing issue.
We going straight down the line here? All right. So, we're all probably going to answer growth, and I'm sure, but I think the root cause of the problems that we face in growth have to do with people who believe the Constitution is there to protect them, but not protect others. And that's probably the biggest headache I see in the city is we all have to deal with public clamor every time new development comes into town. And people have the right, they have property rights. The Fifth Amendment made applicable to the states in the 14th Amendment is a pretty important amendment to the Constitution. And, I've worked hard, but I think I've been pretty unsuccessful to help educate individuals and our citizens that everybody is protected by that document, and people have the right to develop their land and move forward with some of those decisions. It's the city's responsibility, of course, to see that in that process we manage the infrastructure wisely enough that we can prepare for that. But growth is coming. We know that. We can talk about some of those numbers later. But the cities need to be able to deal with that growth intelligently and in a manner to prepare effectively for the future.
Yeah, growth in Spanish Fork, the number one, inconvenience, if you will, for our citizens. That's what they talk to me most about. But our city has been around since 1855, so it's been around a long time. And I'll bet if you went back in the history of every leadership role in our city, whether it was in the early 1900s or the late 1900s or the early 2000s, you would find the number one concern in Spanish Fork was growth still, right? Back then. And so it's not new. I think the number one issue that we're trying to make sure we tackle in Spanish Fork is the growth that's happening is going to happen. Do it in a smart and effective and well-planned way, but do it in a way that protects the quality of life. Not only protects the quality of life that people enjoy in our city, but also grows it. As your community grows, you want a sense of, hey, you're from there, you're proud to be from there. Why are you proud to be from there? And it's got to be, in our city, it's a little bit more than, well, I work in Lehigh, and I don't necessarily want to live all the way up there, and so I want to live down here and commute to Lehigh. Well, there's got to be more to a community sense than that. Why do you live in Spanish Fork? And so it is, those things are sometimes tough to fund, very vital to protect, but the lights turn on, the water goes somewhere when you flush the toilet, turn on the sink and everything, the garbage gets picked up, all those things super important and the first things that you need to take care of in your city. But after that, it is maintaining and growing the quality of life, the open space, the parks, the sense of community. And so that's what we're making sure to tackle in Spanish Fork as we experience that growth.
Yeah, those are all really excellent points. I think we all can understand. I think one of the things that's been really great, here my predecessor and mentor, Mayor Acerson, and our council is whatever the issue is. It doesn't matter if it's water, if it's infrastructure, if it's we need to give the employees a raise, the public safety, all those things. Whatever we're trying to do is how do you get buy-in with the community? How do you make them feel like they're part of the conversation, that they're being heard, that they're being listened to, and that reasonable data-driven decisions are being made? And so I love a statement one of our council members always makes is we've got to make sure that we're careful as the legislative body, that we're educating before we're legislating. And sometimes there is going to come a pinch point where you're going to have to just move forward and make the best decision you can, despite maybe some public clamor, when you've done your very best efforts to do that. So the other thing that I think is coming around the corner is that will be interesting to see is we're looking to start here an economic change potentially, and how's that going to affect this explosive growth that we've been experiencing? It'll be interesting to watch. So we've been starting to talk about, budget-wise, are we going to start to see our sales tax revenues have it, start to come down? We're already seeing some housing prices to soften. So, we're always trying to anticipate and look forward, not just the here and now, but also the future, so that we're, going to be in a good spot, that we can continue to keep our services high and our employees taken care of and the community taken care of, regardless of what may happen economically in the highs and the lows.
So I'm going to push you a little bit here. Obviously, you lead out in your city. You are the elected official that kind of becomes the voice of the community. You also have, you live within a county, and there's a legislative body in the county that can have potentially some influence on things, how you develop and what you do, in the sense that you want to be good partners. Then you also have the state that at times, how do I say this?
Careful what you say there.
Yeah, how do I say this? They're a part of that because they have the oversight for the state of Utah, which we make up individual cities of that, but the growth that's coming is coming statewide, more so in some of the communities. How do you, there's a tendency that I think you feel and see where they want to step in. They want to be a part of that planning for growth and assisting and maybe appropriating, hopefully, some money to help. But how do you see growth in each of your cities? Is it up? Is it spreading? Are you looking at transportation in a way that is it smart development that really takes advantage of the growth that's coming? You're going to have to move people more so than in an individual car. You may be a transit system. It could be alternate ways, trail systems. How do you bring that into your own city? Because density in Eagle Mountain may be different than it is in Linden. I know it is, because in Linden, 6 units per acre was a challenge. It was that was a big time change because it's half acre lots. How do you see that where you can lead out and have smart growth to accommodate your residents and maintain the quality of life, and do it so in a timely way that the state doesn't feel like they need to come in and push you? Go ahead, Mark.
I wasn't raising my hand to voice first. I just didn't know who you wanted to hear from first. That our legislators have a real difficult, problem to deal with. They're feeling the pressure and the demands for growth. I mean, they get that, and I understand that, and they're dealing with what's perceived. And I think in reality is they get a lot of pushback trying to encourage cities to grow. And a number of cities, and I won't speak for them, but I will speak for Lehigh, we think we've done a pretty good job of managing the growth that we've had. We've tried to create as much new housing as we can. We do receive some criticism from our citizens for that. But what we planned our infrastructure out 30, 40 years in the future, because we can only handle the growth that the infrastructure will allow. And we've been working on that. I see Representative Malloy is here, and he and I have had a number of great conversations about how to deal with this in the future, with the city's thoughts on it and the legislators' thoughts on that. But we manage and we evaluate our infrastructure extremely closely. And I'm already pushing some road solutions that really probably won't be constructed for the next 10 years, but we have to acquire that property to build those roads. And so I'm involved in a big effort there at the point of the mountain, because we all know we have transportation issues there. As a city, I suggested to the council when we did our general plan that was approved late last year, I think in December, that we move our densities into TODs. And we actually have, as Jeff, as you know, we have 6 TODs planned in Lehigh.
Now tell them what a TOD is. Just
transit-oriented development. And so that's, we're looking forward to having transit come down to these. We already have one stop with Front Runner. And we've moved almost all our density to those locations. We know that growth is coming. It's just hard to strong arm it and keep it away. The census in 2010 had us at 72,000. Our census numbers right now, our population, we believe, is at 85,000. So that's in 2 years, and with the understanding that census numbers sometimes lag. They often do. So we're preparing that, but we're concerned. We're concerned about sewer. We're concerned about water, just like everybody is. Of course, transportation. We're concerned about power because we have our own power system. We need to work extremely closely with our legislators so they understand our infrastructure issues and we understand where the housing needs to be. We need to have critical conversations with them in this involvement.
moving more towards a real partnership to where that honest, direct conversation could take place and solutions can come forward.
Absolutely. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing. We can't lose sight of that, right? We know by 2030, right, 8 years away, our population is going to double. By 2065, it's going to triple. Okay, so this is pretty significant. That's in Utah County, and so we're dealing with the same headache. We're dealing with the same problem. We got to work at this smart.
Mayor Westmoreland, Eagle Mountain's kind of, well, you heard me say it. It's two cities, really, isn't it? Kind of tell us how you're dealing with that growth and the spread. Are you bringing the two cities together? What are your plans?
Yeah, we have to deal with so many different factors. It kind of feels like we're running in multiple directions at the same time, because we do have that feel of multiple cities, and we're this hybrid, if you will, of we've got the rural, we've got the urban, and with it all. We're over 50 square miles of land, and we are not yet a quarter built out. So planning is critical to doing this right. And that's where the concern of our residents come in, because they're seeing all this rapid change, and they're asking, where is this taking us? What are we going to be? We know what Eagle Mountain was like when we moved here, but where is this tide of growth taking us, and what is it going to do to our quality of life? And so, as Mayor Johnson mentioned, those partnerships with the county, with the state, and even to some extent, perhaps even the federal government, in ensuring that in the end, and through the process, that our residents have a high quality of life. And so that's a lot of conflicting planning to do. and a lot of investment in our community. So we ask a lot of our developers when they come in, and all their concern is what's the value outcome? Is this going to be a winning proposition for everyone? And so in order to gain that trust, in that confidence, in that vision, in that direction, yeah, it takes all those partners on the same page and working together.
Okay, I want to turn the time over to Mayor Lundberg for a second, and then we'll come to Mayor Mendenhall. Linden City, 2.5 miles by 7. It's a defined area. It isn't as big as Eagle Mountain nor any of the other cities represented here. Growth. How are you leading the way in charge and trying to maintain the quality of life, but in turn allow that growth to take place in a smart way? And what does that look like for Linden?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what the legislators, hopefully we can remind them as cities that at the local level, we really are trying to address these different pressures. And so that's where it gets difficult when at the legislative level, sometimes it appears from our perspective that they're constantly chipping away at local authority, local control. One of the things that's a great example is just in the breakout that was here prior that I attended on housing, speaking with that representative afterwards, saying, Representative, one of the things that would really help the legislature is if they knew there was some sort of a database when we entitle, X number of units that are not yet built, because it takes a number of years, that the state could see that. They say, well, here's our data on how many, housing units we're short. Well, maybe some of that is already being met. And so I think as I talk with other cities, most cities are really trying and working hard towards this issue. And so we don't need more top-down, one-size-fits-all, kind of approach. I think there is good communication and collaboration going. Just for example, in Linden, how do we keep that quality of life and that sense of community and connectedness? I think part of the conversation we need to be real about is when we develop, yes, let's do, perhaps the highest density near those transit corridors. But then also, I think the mentality in the past of, well, we can just put all the density kind of over there, out there, whereas maybe thinking of ways that you can kind of mix different housing opportunities within established neighborhoods and communities. So in Linden, we have a special overlay where, even though we have the half-acre lots, there's an overlay code in which you could have a duplex or you could have a little triplex within so many feet or within so many concentric circles. So you have people that can kind of blend into those, what would typically be maybe more expensive areas, but then those people can be mentored. Those single moms can be in the carpools and their kids can attend the great schools. And so instead of thinking, put it over there and we're going to stay here, just sprinkling it around so it's not too intense in any one place. And then those people can really be connected and become a neighborhood and a community.
Okay, Mayor Mendenhall.
Yeah. The state as a whole and us as cities are somewhat of a product of our own success, right? We've incentivized business to happen here in the state of Utah. We're very competitive when it comes to the nation and our cities as well. And so the good things that happen with that economic development, to be able to keep our individual property taxes low and then have economic vibrancy in each of our communities, does cause a pinch on where are people going to live. I agree with what the mayor said here about geographically. That stuff needs to make sure that it's planned in a way that makes it effective for all of the region. At the League of Cities and Towns, which Mayor Johnson, Mayor Kaufusi is your upcoming president of the league, and Mayor Johnson's on the board. We constantly are having those conversations as leaders across the state, but along with the legislature. Cities do not build housing. They don't build affordable housing. but they zone for types of housing. You'd be hard pressed if I drive through Provo like I did just yesterday and see the housing that's around their transportation hub. You're going to be hard pressed to tell me Provo is not doing an effective job in density around transportation. Now at Lehigh, I've seen Lehigh's plans. We've taken Mayor Johnson's plans around his TODs and showed them, hey, Spanish Fork, here's what's going to happen when we get a TOD down this far. Here's the effective planning that happens around that. Now, does that mean people are like, oh, okay, Mayor Mendenhall, I really love that? No, you can come visit me every first and third Tuesday in a city council meeting, and you can hear Councilman Euler was here, a couple other councilmen from Spanish Fork, and you'll hear what they have to say to us about that. Where we start to miss when we're communicating with different levels of government, whether that be the county or the state, and we've got great partners. Don't get me wrong. We work well on 99% of the things that we're trying to overcome as far as problems. But as far as housing goes, the cities only have so many tools in that toolbox. And so when we can use those tools, let's talk about those tools we can use effectively. But some of that stuff is in the queue, and it takes time to build. There's a zone in Spanish Fork that didn't exist 5 years ago, and now that zone is in a few different places in our community. But there's only one building built so far. Only one building, and people actually moved into that. So some of that stuff is time that we can't control the economics of a developer saying, hey, yeah, we were going to build that, and thanks for that zoning, and we're going to sit on this for a bit because lumber prices are what they are. What's Spanish Fork supposed to do about lumber prices, right? What are we supposed to do about land prices, right? The economics of construction are sometimes, all the time, out of a city's hands. But what we can do is make sure that the planning and zoning are there. And I'll let anybody know, hey, those hard discussions are taking place. They're taking place the first and third Tuesday in Spanish Fork, and then Saturday in the grocery store and everywhere else. And if you don't believe it, come down or watch a YouTube video and you'll see it. I've only been sued once since 9 years in public service, and it was because a single-family housing neighborhood that was next to a school and next to actually a secondary school too, an MATC building, and the development that wanted to go in between the two was a townhome development. I mean, we're not talking as far as 6 units the acre. This is more like 4 units the acre. And that was too much for the single family, development next door. So they decided to sue. And thankfully we overcame that and moved on. But that is hard discussions happening in Spanish Fork. And I know all across the Wasatch Front. Does it make sense for Linden to start talking about 20 units the acre in development? Probably not, because Linden people have to drive through 2 other communities to get, to the freeway sometimes, right? So it doesn't make sense. But if you touch Highway 6 and I-15 like Spanish Fork does, yes, you certainly should be thinking about where those dense projects go. And that's going up. You're right, that's going up. That's probably stacking some apartments and condos on top of each other.
Go ahead. Jeff, could I just kind of tag on
Please
to that?
do, yeah.
Because I often hear there's often a perception that cities are just resistant to growth and maybe not doing their part in housing. Just to help with that context, right now we estimate Eagle Mountain has a population close to 60,000 residents. And with the current vested units, that we have, if those were built today, that would take us to 175,000 residents, if those were built today. That does not count the developments that are in planning, right? We have a developer that is working toward a 10,000 unit development. So cities, as far as housing goes, we're using, like Mayor Mendenhall said, we're using every tool in our toolbox to get there.
So let me ask the question, and thank you for your responses. The state legislature, through the planning organizations, gave some funding for the community cities to actually come up with what we want to call is a stationary plan. transit or how you're going to move people within your community. You're probably already well down that path, but have you found that to be helpful? Are you utilizing that? Is that a mechanism that will help you determine some of the transportation issues that you're going to deal with as this housing is multiplied tenfold or whatever? Any thoughts on that?
Part of my problem, not problem, but part of my thought with that is the plan is great. It's got to come hand in glove with that housing. If I'm in Spanish Fork, if around a new hospital and a new retail center, and yes, that's where some higher densities are supposed to go, and we say, okay, well, here's the planned TOD stop that's going to go there. It should be built about the same time that people are moving into those apartments and condos, right? And we just cut a ribbon. Mayor Fullmer was here a minute ago. That's the connection, the collaboration with the state on those. People are in Spanish Fork, when you talk about a $60 million rec center and a $130 million sewer treatment plant, those are huge numbers for a population of 45,000. And so we're having big discussions about that. That's a drop in the bucket compared to what it takes to get rail down here and those developments down here. And so yes, that's partnership with the state that has to happen, coinciding with that development that happens.
Thank you. Mayor Johnson?
So, yeah, I think the station area plan, I think it's a great tool. And Jeff, we're using it around Thanksgiving Point. We got a 2,000 unit, not unit, but 2,000 unit site there, and we're trying to build that out because we know that's the front runner is a key TOD stop for us. But what a lot of people don't realize, we actually already have 2 approved TODs. One has already been constructed. The other one is starting construction that have already been approved, and we call them ODs, odd developments, because there's no T yet. And I've been putting as much pressure on UTA, and Jeff knows this, and anybody else I can who will listen to me in this state, that we need to bring transit down around the point of the mountain, whether it's tracks or BRT. I don't even really care about that debate. I just want that debate solved. I want to know what the mode is, and I want it down there because they're going to serve these other TODs that we have. Now, for the ones that haven't been built yet, I'm excited to be able to use this new tool because UTA has been absolutely wonderful to work on the product that's going to be produced at Thanksgiving Point. So I'm very appreciative of this opportunity, and I encourage everybody to join up with that.
I didn't pay him for that comment, but here's something that we really need to figure out, and it's a real challenge for communities because the growth is coming. People are going to be moving there, building new homes, whatever that home looks like, if it's a high-rise or an individual family home. How do we move people? Because we have just a certain number of highways or roads, local roads, county roads, state roads. There's a transit element to that. What is the proper mix? And here's the real question. Before all that housing goes in, can we preserve those corridors that allow us to have the opportunity to provide the T and the TOD, the transit? Any thoughts on that? How are you doing as a city in trying to set aside or define in your planning what those corridors look like, working with the planning organizations? And sometimes it's a moving target, but what can you do or have you done to try to ensure that we have that opportunity to continue to move people? Mayor.
Love to head off. So in Linden, we have a main corridor that we've identified, created a special area plan. We call it the Linden Village, where we could have potentially an identifiable downtown, and transportation is a big part of that. Within that plan, how could the different parcels, if they developed, different points versus a master plan developer, how would there be walkability and access to the transit? We've identified future BRT station potential, track station potential. Of course, obtaining, right-of-ways or land to make sure those are insured, that's always a challenge. We've talked with staff about, UDOT now owns the road. what are the setbacks we want to require when the development comes, knowing that right now we have a lovely tree-lined street, but UDOT may at some point want to take that out for another lane. What does that do to the green space and, the sidewalk? So staff looks at all those things carefully to just have that long-range view of when this really pops and grows, what will the transportation look like and what does it need?
Okay. Mayor Westmoreland?
Yeah, we really appreciate the relationship that we have with all the various planning groups, with UDOT, with UTA, with MAG, and we realize all of the challenges that go into creating a plan and then fulfilling it, because across the state there are growth issues and transportation needs. So we are we're learning as we grow and doing our best to take on perhaps some additional responsibility. I don't want this to sound condemning. I mean, we're just adapting and trying to do what we can, but we don't have all of maybe the best resources for planning where like a freeway goes and things like that. So we're guessing. We're working with landowners and trying to figure out where those lines should be drawn on a map, and then how to go about funding that right-of-way preservation. And there are preservation funds for that right-of-way that perhaps it's probably would be quite valuable to work together to look at to see if we can expand on those funds and get a little further ahead of that right-of-way preservation, because in Eagle Mountain, we're planning pretty far out, but the things we're trying to do, we're trying to get as much done early as we can, because those land values just keep going up, and so we can forever chase them. And we have a better shot at, even though it still ends up being a considerable investment, we have a much better shot at getting those lands set aside earlier rather than later, because then you're just chasing those values, and it's unfortunate for many landowners, because some of them want to move forward with plans perhaps they already have, and their properties can be effectively condemned once you draw a line through the middle of their property. So the more we can move on that, the better off everyone will be, the more we can move forward with trust and confidence that this plan will work.
So I'm just going to encourage you as mayors to have that conversation to increase the amount of money that the state sets aside for corridor preservation. It is probably going to be the best investment that we can have, because just as you said, those land values are going up and up. Planning is happening, and the more we can invest now is going to save more money in the long run. We're not going to be taking out buildings and houses and all that kind of stuff. So go ahead, Mayor. And then
I want to share something really fun. So Linden right now, our Walmart, one of the things you asked was, how are we going to be moving people? Well, the question is, are people going to be the ones moving in the future with technology? We just had a drone-up company come and test. They're partnering with Walmart, and Linden is going to beta test. They have this big drone. It's like, I don't know, a 4x4 around, and they're going to set up what they want to do. We're still working with all of it with the city's permitting, but they're planning to beta test where they will have drone delivery within a 1 mile radius of that Walmart. And they showed us where, they put the food or the merchandise that someone can order from home, and it goes to their house or their business, drops it with a cable to deliver. It's really interesting. So we'll see where someone could get groceries or be baking, and I'm out of eggs. 30 minutes later, a drone brings it to their house. So
I'm still waiting for Star Trek, where we can just take the material and then transport it and then make it reappear. So anyway, Mayor Mendenhall or whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, spend the money. Spend the money down south. Everybody, when we're in a discussion like this, and they say, "Here's the available open land that we have down in Spanish Fork in South Utah County. So here's an area where all this growth is going to happen." Spend the money now. You'll to preserve those corridors is a lot less expensive than eminent domain and tearing down homes or businesses or anything like that. So spend the money now. I've always told Mayor Acerson, hey, we send millions of dollars up to UTA every year. As far as people down in Spanish Fork, we get 3 buses out of it or something down in Spanish Fork. But I know our investment is truly an investment. I say that tongue in cheek because that is an investment that's going statewide, and it is an investment that's helping people move more effectively from Provo and up to the point of the mountain and past the point of the mountain. And so I know that every person that hops on that is a person not on the freeway for me to get to where I need to go. So we understand the team playing mentality down in South Utah County. But yes, some of that money needs to start coming to that end of the county more regularly, because every dollar you spend today is going to save a couple of dollars in the future.
It isn't. Okay, it's dead. It's in the. Is that one gone too? Hello? They don't want me to say anything. Oh, there we go. It is in the 5-year service plan. And, there are projects that are slated throughout Utah County, and, the county commission has the ability to enact what is called a fifth that the legislators have put in place for transit to help with that infrastructure. And we'll just have to see if they feel the need and have the wherewithal to move forward in a right way, because obviously I represent UTA, been former mayor. I know how to talk the talk. I know how to walk the walk. I've been there. I know the challenge you have, everyone has. But the reality of it is we need to invest in the future, and now is the time, and it's in all areas of housing, the infrastructure for the services we provide. But transit needs to be a critical part of that, and the planning to make sure that it gets into our communities to the extent that each community welcomes that, and plans and the zoning and everything to accommodate that, because planning can help magnify or increase the ability to use transit and move people. And I know you're aware of that, and we're working on that. And
I don't want it to sound like I feel I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't know, in people's eyes, maybe you're not. But when I'm not saying overspend our money, and spend us into some situation that is untenable, but it's not doing your citizens a favor in a city or in the county or in the state to sit on money and call it, well, this is a rainy day fund, and then we like having rainy day funds above our rainy day funds to sit there. You're losing to inflation, and you're losing you're losing time with those residents as well. We're only going to have a certain time as elected officials, and then we're all going to only have a certain time walking on earth. And so if you're not spending those dollars, then what service are you doing? Your city's not going to go down as like, hey, we had the biggest checking account in the city ever. Oh, great. Well, you taxed me. It sat in an account, and you were real proud about it sitting in an account, but you didn't spend the money on what could have improved my quality of life.
Mayor. Yeah, Mayor Mendenhall, you're absolutely right. We're all conservatives, fiscal conservatives, and perhaps we should even use the word investment rather than spend, because, yeah, as that money sits in an account, even if it's just over a day, it's losing value. The land is not losing value, and so if we're investing towards the future. That saves money. That's conservative.
Go ahead, Mayor.
So if I can, Jeff. So, it would not be a bad estimate to say that over 90% of the corridors in Lehigh have already been acquired. And land acquisition is really, really difficult. And people would look at Lehigh, well, like, you already got your corridors, you're all set. But there's that 10%, that 5 to 10% that we haven't acquired yet. And the problem in Lehigh, because of the value of land and the location, which is basically along the freeway corridor, has gotten so expensive. we still have to acquire land, and it's very difficult to do. Now, we've used a tool for years in Lehigh, and it's through the density bonus program. It's how Pioneer Crossing got built, in part. At least that's how the land got acquired. Is we allowed developers we gave them extra density if they would donate, the land for that corridor. But we had to know where that corridor needed to be before we could do that. So cities have to plan for that. You have to understand where those corridors are going to be. Now, there's one thing of interest I think I could say to help illustrate how important this is. Mayor Fullmer is here, and I know in Vineyard, they've approved 20,000 units in one area, okay, right by the front runner. Now, they're going to live there, they're going to work in Lehigh, and they're going to work in Draper. So I don't have to tell you, they've got to find a way to be there. So they can take front runner and they can get to Thanksgiving Point, but then they still got to get across the freeway over to Silicon Slopes, because that's the area where a lot of them are going to work. So working to improve the track system or the BRT, once again, whatever mode that may be, is critical, because they're going to need both those methods to get to their workplace every day and back. And right now, I mean, it was several years ago, we probably brought in 35,000 workers a day into Lehigh. I'd say we're probably close to double that now. That's coming in now that they're all going back to work again. So, yeah, for the other cities, you've got to have that in your master transportation plans. You have to include transit. You have to figure out where those corridors are and work with UTA so they're in agreement with those. Because right now, trying to figure out how to get people from one side of the freeway to the other side of the freeway, at the point of the mountain, is a very, very difficult thing to do.
Expensive as well.
Very much so.
So we've got just about a few minutes left. I want to give you this opportunity. If money was not an issue, in other words, you had an infinite amount of money, what would you do with it for your city?
You realize this could be a very long list. Yeah. Go ahead, Mayor Mendenhall.
I'd build a city building like Mayor Kaufusi has. That's what I'd do. It might take that much. It might take that much, yeah, and an infinite amount. No.
Or an airport.
An airport too, yeah. She's got a pretty cool airport. Right now it's Spanish Fork City, and this is unique to us simply because we've been using everybody else's recreation centers. It gets cold in Utah. I don't know if anybody has caught on to that yet, but we're just we're coming into the months now where people are like, all right, what do we do, and how do our seniors find a place to walk and keep healthy? And so, man, we use the Provo Rec Center a lot. We use Springville's Rec Center a lot. Spanish Fork, we just approved this year in a budget, a Spanish Fork Recreation Center, more sales tax revenue based than property tax revenue. But I'm super proud that we're going to start construction. We're starting the planning phases of that now. And so you won't have to look at Spanish Fork residents weird when they walk in your places and say, hey, get out, we need this space. But if I had an unlimited amount of money, I wouldn't tax the residents for that. I'd just build it and then would name it after somebody. No, it's a facility that I think the quality of life in Spanish Fork, great open space, parks, pickleball courts, trails, everything else that when you ask your residents what they love about your communities, they say that stuff. And it's been really tough in Spanish Fork to say, hey, what do you like about it in November to February? Yeah, I like sitting in my house waiting for the warm weather to come back. So.
You do have some of the best baseball fields down there.
We do. It's just really cold in February to try to hit a baseball.
It's not a year-round sport. Mayor Johnson.
I mean, it comes to mind just parks. I'd probably build our parks. It's as these city leaders know, that's kind of the hardest way to find money to develop anything. In 2016, Lehigh City went out with a bond proposal to build 2 of our regional parks. We actually have 4, so we've got close to 300 acres of parks that we need to build. And the bond failed. And at that time, we would have built 2 of those regional parks. We would have finished them for about $13 million. That was 2016. So that wasn't very long ago. Right now, the estimates to build those parks is $43 million. That's the increase that we're facing. We cannot do it through just, sales tax income and that. You've got to find new mechanisms to build those parks. We're working on those, but boy, I'll tell you what, Jeff, if you have a way to give us unlimited funds or figure out how we can get those, we'll take them and we'll spend them.
I'll do the best I can. Mayor Lundberg?
I guess my approach would be, yes, there might be some worthy projects. I think whenever we're looking at investment, we need to look at what is the corresponding potential liabilities of maintaining those investments, and that becomes a burden for the citizens in the future as well. All these things that help make the quality of life great, of course, are very wonderful. But I think with unlimited money, our council would want to look at what taxes and fees could we reduce. We have people on fixed incomes. We have people that are, going through hard times. And so we have to remember always, as fiduciaries, it is the taxpayers' money that we're looking to spend. So anything that we're going to do that we're going to spend, how does it help future generations? Always weighing those two against one another is important.
Yeah, Linden City is pretty blessed with just the layout of the city and the sales tax that's generated there. Thank you, all the neighboring cities that come and buy things in Linden. But Mayor Westmoreland, I want to have you weigh in on this.
Okay, I'll try not to go too long, but
well, you have about 2 minutes.
Okay,
so.
I'll try to squeeze it all in. Yeah, in a city like Eagle Mountain, where we have so many miles of land that needs to be planned, the people are going to live there one day, and they're going to expect and frankly need a high quality of life, and so that's not an unreasonable request. So definitely, you've got to have a way to pay for all this stuff. And if the genie's going to come and grant 3 wishes, my first wish is going to be for more wishes, right? So one of the things, the gifts that keeps on giving is economic development. So you have to have. It doesn't matter what your project is. You've got to have a way to pay for it. And economic development is a way to get there. So certainly, I would work to bring as many healthy, robust businesses to our part of the valley as I possibly could, because it's not just growth we're dealing with, but we all sense the pressures that are coming down on us, whether it's inflation, whether it's drought, whether growth, whether what's Russia going to do? What is China going to do? What's the next pandemic? All of those things weigh on us and impact our quality of life. Even in our planning, it gets challenging because we might think we're doing well, in our annual budgets, and then we find out even acquisition of parts for a new well are a year and a half out, and that target may be moving. So in Eagle Mountain, we're kind of gluttons for punishment, and we always like to bite off more than we can chew. So we're working to as the other mayors have mentioned, the quality of life aspect with parks and trails is really important to a physically and psychologically healthy community, so how do we get all that land? And so that's acquiring that land would be huge, because when we are all built out, it'll be too late to go back and try to figure out where to put those parks. What do you do with the deer that migrate through the community? Do you end up having to call the herd, or do you accommodate them, and all of the other wildlife? So certainly, and I'll just I know Holly's heard me say this with Representative Burgess, but both state and federal government, if we can figure out a way to give a little stronger tax credits to landowners that are willing to donate land to that open space cause, to preserve wildlife and to preserve outdoor recreation, so that our kids, in Utah County and in Eagle Mountain, we raise a lot of kids, and we need to be able to do it well. And a healthy part of that is is really giving them outdoor recreation options that are immediately available to them. And I'm going to close out with our food supply if I can. So whatever we can do to make our agriculture and food supply, our local food supply, more robust, I think we will all benefit from that in the future.
Thank you. You all know this, but Governor Cox has introduced an initiative to connect our trails throughout the state of Utah. So that's an opportunity as cities to make sure we tie into that statewide system, whatever that looks like. I think there's going to be funding allocated for that. There is a surplus at the state this year, just like last year, probably even more so. And there are going to be a lot of hands out to have that money come in many different directions. But be at the table, be a part of that conversation, because we are a part of Utah. And as each of our cities grow and interact and work together, we're going to have a better Utah. So appreciate it. You mayors are great. Keep up the great work. So are we done? I think we're over time, so I think we're good. One question. Go ahead. Give him one question.
Go ahead, right here. Okay, I know that the growth is coming. I know everything you said here is kind of working towards to receive the growth. So one thing, I'm from the refugee background, and I represent a large community of refugees in Utah County. And one thing I've heard before is Utah County is the hotspot for refugees. And I lived in Utah County for the last 18 years. I never noticed that, but now I'm representing the community, I'm seeing that. So in your series, what are you doing to make the city to be a welcoming place? What type of project do you guys have?
One sentence. Just give them one sentence of what you're doing to welcome refugees.
Our logo in Spanish Fork is the home of pride and progress. So we're really proud of our heritage, our Icelandic heritage, Hispanic heritage, everything that makes up Spanish Fork from nearly 100 years ago. We're really proud of that, but we're not afraid of progress. In fact, we lean into it. So we're asking people, come be a part of Spanish Fork. If you want to start a new tradition, it's a great place to start a new tradition because people will glom onto it. So we're proud of where we've been, but leaning into progress.
Last year during our holiday season, we had activities throughout the community that month of December, and we did invite the refugee organizations to come and participate and bring the kids and meet Santa and do the crafts and the workshops. And it was really fun for all the kids to kind of meet one another from within the community and learn about those traditions and feel part of the community.
Mayor Johnson.
So yeah, Lehigh has become an incredibly diverse community, if you will, and I've seen remarkable changes since I've been mayor and before. But what's impressed me most is the efforts that our community does to welcome, people that are from different backgrounds, the refugees that come in. There's been just incredible efforts to help people feel at home in Lehigh, and I expect that's going to continue.
Yeah, definitely. We're trying to create jobs across the employment spectrum. So wherever somebody is, there's a connecting point and a way to enter into the employment community, and and gathering places so that cultures, people can gather, cultures can be displayed and expressed and enjoyed together, and people can get to know each other.
Thank you for that question. And as a former mayor, I would say reach out to these mayors, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to work with you. Okay? Thank you. We appreciate everyone being here. Give them a round of applause.
up there? Okay. Well, this is a session on clean air. And we have several people with us. And chair number 2 here is Clint Campbell. And tell me the company you're with.
I am with Utah Transit Authority, long range planning.
Great.
Hello, everyone.
UTA has a big role to play in all of this. And then chair number 3 is Judd Cook. Just briefly tell us who you're with and what you do.
So I'm with Dominion Energy, and I'm the director of operations, gas operations for all of the western U.S. So our operations here in Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho. If you've ever called Dominion Energy because maybe you smelled gas or you needed to turn on a service line or something like that, that's my group, my folks that come out and work with you there. But I also have other duties as assigned. You guys know what that's like, right? You always get a special project with your job, and my special project is to work on sustainability and clean air initiatives for Dominion.
Great, thank you very much. And in chair number 4 is Daniela Larson. She's with Hutchings Institute and on the Lehigh Sustainability Committee. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, thank you. I also work with the Jordan River Commission, and we work a lot with National Geographic and educating for creating the future that we want and educating especially young people. And it's funny the force that they can be to put the screws on their parents about planning for a future for clean air. So this is a subject I'm so excited about.
Thank you. I'm Ned Hill. I was a professor at BYU in international finance, but my interest in birds caused me to swerve toward environmental stuff on the side, and so that's how I got involved in the Provo Sustainability Committee, and we have a clean air task force for Utah Valley that's sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce and also by Utah Health Department, Utah County Health Department. So now I'm retired. I'm the chair of Provo Power, and so I have worn a lot of hats in this area. The first question I would like to ask the panel is, why are we talking about clean air at a chamber event for businesses? Why is clean air something that businesses need to worry about? Go ahead, we'll just go down the low line here.
Okay. First thing I usually like to start this off with is just quickly a raise of hands as to how many people took transit to get to this conference today. Anybody? Any front runner folk? Buses? Nothing? Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah, it gives me a little bit of an idea of kind of the room, what we're talking about, and how we can talk about this. So obviously, clean air is important for everyone. Utah is growing at a very rapid rate. As population doubles, emissions are possible to double, which has a lot of negative environmental impacts. So making sure that we have a great place to live and keeping Utah amazing is the only way that we continue to have growth. And if we want to see businesses succeed and just have a good general population and health, I mean, I think it's really important that we figure out this air quality issue.
Well, terrific. And I'd just add to that I think air quality would be an important issue at any conference, whether it's a conference on business and growth or a conference on education or a conference on healthy lifestyles. Air quality plays a role in every aspect of our lives. And it's important that we're doing what we can to keep the air clean, to help the environment, and to be a part of the solution.
Why do I think it's as important to business? I just got back from a conference in the Netherlands. It was all about building with nature. And they had brought together a bunch of scientists from around the world talking about different things that they have been doing. And the idea that economic development, conservation, clean air, green space, all these things are separate issues is something that I'm finding is a lot more unique to Utah and to the U.S. than some of these other countries that really see that, and I see us really going in that way, but you cannot have one without the other. Conservation, clean air, clean fuel, all of those things depend so much on economic development and sustainability, and so it's hard to measure how important clean air is to business.
Thank you. Does Utah have a clean air problem? Yes, we do. We have a mountain range that is beautiful, wonderful skiing and recreating there. And it also blocks out the atmospheric movement of air toward the east, which is the prevailing sense of the wind usually. And it brings all kinds of stuff, keeps it there on the Wasatch Front, causing inversions, causing us to not clean out the air like it does in many other cities that are kind of flat. And so we do have a clean air problem. Do you know that on August 6th, 2021, last year, Utah, that is to say Salt Lake, primarily the Salt Lake area, but also including Utah County and north, had the worst air in the entire world. Worst air in the entire world. That means we are, the way they measure air quality, we had the worst air quality of any. We have had air quality problems in the past, and people have done a lot about it. The Environmental Protective Agency many years ago said, Utah, you've got to clean up your air or we're not going to fund your freeways. We're not going to fund a lot of other things that you're doing. So Utah created the Department of Air Quality. They formed a group called UCARE, Utah Clean Air, and they have taken a lot of efforts to educate people, to help businesses understand what needs to happen, and that has shown that over the years, our number of bad air days is gradually going down. Our air quality is improving, but it still has a long way to go. Any comments on that?
I'd just make one quick comment about it. It's interesting. I did know that on that date we had the worst air quality in the world, really, and it's interesting that was August 6th. Traditionally, our air quality issues have been during winter months, but that day it was specifically associated with wildfires, and it was a summer month that we saw that poor air quality. And so one of the issues that we'll face going forward with air quality is not just an issue of a seasonal type problem with air quality, just a winter or colder month issue. With the wildfires we're seeing in the West now, it's going to be a major issue. It's a year-long problem now.
Yeah, and on top of the wildfires, also ozone-related issues. We get a lot of talk about the inversion problems that we can see, smog, smoke, wildfires, as well as inversion, but also ozone in the summer months is much more prevalent, so it's something we think about as a transit agency, making sure that we can help reduce those emissions, because, yeah, it's also, like you mentioned, it's no longer just a seasonal problem. It's year-round if we don't get control of it.
I love that you're, looking at the past, even just last year, to see what was going on with that. This week, the Museums Association of Utah and the Utah Historical Society had their big conferences here in Provo as well, and they were looking at pictures of, Provo and the Salt Lake Valley just in the early 1900s, and the clouds of smog and smoke when our main source of fuel was wood were horrendous as well. Every time that we change our main source of energy, like we're trying to move to cleaner energies, and things right now, there is a lot of progress, but we need to realize as these cycles inevitably happen with where we get our energy, oftentimes those sources of fuel also create other problems as well. So moving to coal helped a lot with that, but now as we're trying to figure out what to do next, we need to see what problems are being created by that, and what do we want to give and take, where in the last session some of the mayors were talking about how they don't want to see maybe a bridge across Utah Lake. What's the cost of the fuel that we use driving around it, all of the time? Like sometimes we're saving in one area, but we're spending so much in another, making the situation worse, that we just really need to be exploring solutions for the future that take those things into account.
I'd like to ask you a question about impact on businesses. Have you seen any examples of businesses who have lost potential employees or current employees because of air quality issues? I have. I'll give you an example. We had a professor at BYU who had some health problems, and her doctor told her that if she did not leave this area and go to an area where it was cleaner in air, that her life expectancy would be many years reduced from what it should have been. I've seen that happen several times with people that I know.
Yeah, personal experience, I've had that same thing with grandparents having to leave, which is very unfortunate in the Salt Lake Valley. But on the flip side as well, we also notice people wanting to work with UTA and the transit organizations because of its impact on helping provide clean air. So as opposed to people running from Utah being like, oh, the air quality is terrible, we also get some recruitment being like, hey, if I'm working as an operator, if I'm working at FLHQ, I can have a positive impact on making sure that Utah's air is cleaner. So we get the flip side of that as well.
You know, I can't think of any specific examples within our own company. I was thinking back to our experience. We hire a lot of employees here, and we're a large employer in the state of Utah. So I can't think of a specific example where they've cited air quality as maybe a reason for leaving or not hiring on with the company. And I think one of the reasons I can't think of a specific example is because we try to do a lot to educate our employees and to work with our employees and to offer programs to our customers that help clean up the air in the state of Utah. We have great energy efficiency conservation type programs. Many of you in this room have likely participated in some of those energy efficiency programs. We have hybrid work schedules that allow employees, office-based employees, to work from home a certain number of days during the week. We have a carbon right program that allows our customers to be really net zero for their natural gas usage, and we try to invest in renewable natural gas programs that all play a role in help cleaning up the environment. And so we have a sustainability advocacy program, and we just finished, in fact, for this year, training all of our employees in our sustainability initiative. So I think it's one thing that gets our employees excited about working for our company.
Employment, definitely, as far as people coming to check it out, especially if they come on a bad day and we're like up on the hill in Saratoga Springs and you look down over the lake and you see this big black cloud over it. It's always, off-putting. I personally have a daughter that is much more comfortable living out of state just because her asthma is so much worse here when the air quality is bad. And so it's definitely something that we want to, rectify, make public transportation really cool. One of the things I heard at this conference was that, a rich country isn't where everybody has cars. Rich countries where rich people are taking public transportation, and shifting that mindset and how we think about that, I think is a big part of how we can, plan for that future so that it is a more inviting place to come to work.
Oh, I mean, I just totally echo that. As far as just using transit as a way to mitigate air pollution is huge. A typical single occupancy vehicle produces about 53 grams of CO2 on a standard 7-mile trip versus if you were to take a bike to a transit station, which is pretty much zero, or a bus to a transit like track station for that same 7-mile trip would produce about 4 grams. So, I mean, there really is a large difference just being able to switch that narrative as far as making sure people think transit when you think good air quality.
Thank you. Let's see. There are other air quality problems that we have sometimes in the West, and one is radon, for example. Radon is a radioactive gas that sometimes comes into a house through the floors, and if there are radioactive sources anywhere near there. And so one of the things that the health department is doing is encouraging people to check their homes for radon exposure. Radon causes cancer. And while we don't have very many smokers in Utah as a percentage of the people, we do have a fairly high cancer rate, lung cancer rate, and they're almost all caused by radon. So there are lots of ways that this Clean Air Task Force that's sponsored by the Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce, we're looking at all of those things, and we have people who are experts in each one of those fields to help us understand what we can do to improve the air around us, not just in the wintertime, but in the summertime, ozone problems, radon, and other things that happen with it. What are some more things that companies can do to help clean the air? You mentioned some of them, but if you could think of some other ones, I'd be glad to hear them.
Yeah, so UTA has constantly been thinking about this. We have programs dating back to, 2005, not that long ago, but it is in the grand scheme of things, where we just reduced idling, and it saved us over $100,000 and also cut emissions immensely within the fleet. UTA is now ISO 14001, so it's a big part of trying to go green and be environmental, as well as. And with that air quality component, there's a lot of focus right now on this new philosophy of transit-oriented communities. So having these places next to transit stops, front-runner stops that have housing, have businesses, have all of these amenities, so it makes it really easy to work, live, play right next to transit and be able to go visit your family that lives just one transit stop away or whatnot. Just making sure that we have really well-connected communities so people don't have to feel like they have to drive those single occupancy vehicles as much. So that's one thing UTA is doing, looking at it from a more holistic approach. We're also working on active transportation plans. So AT3P is an active transportation plan to transit. So over 80% of our ridership comes from people walking or biking to transit. So you can tell that that's a huge portion of the people that use our system. So making sure that they feel safe being able to bike or walk. Not only does that help reduce any greenhouse gas emissions, it also just makes for much better communities. So being able to support the communities that we service is a big part of what UTA is doing right now.
Another big one I think that businesses, can do, and we're working with several businesses if anybody's interested in anything like this, is even in small things like, park strips and parking lots, or, where we usually just have like mulch or grass, being open to planting like low water pollinating plants, things that actually, help convert the air and clean it. Trees. We have so many more trees now here in Utah Valley than we used to before. There's one of the soda places out in Saratoga Springs, for example. They had a bunch of lavender and a sign that just talked about not idling your car right there. And just those little opportunities to educate people and just kind of shift the dial on the individual actions that people can take to create a future where we have, much cleaner air, I think is a really important thing. Now, is it that program that has like the no idling program that have like the signs and are getting like cities and stuff involved? Is that UTA or is that a different?
No, that is a different organization, but
Okay.
that is something that UTA looks at. Like as cities start to put more regulations in, obviously we want to stick to those same kind of things and make sure that we're supporting that stuff.
I know a lot of the schools are getting into having signs about parents not idling, and kids love policing their parents.
Yeah, idle-free zones,
give them a
right?
chance to scold their parents for something, and they'll enforce that for you for sure.
The Provo Sustainability Committee, for the past many years, has sent some educators, some BYU students, and some of our staff out to visit all the elementary schools in Provo and talk to them about clean air and talk to them about idling cars. They get back home and they tell their parents you can't idle, and that's worked really well. And help them learn other things that they can do to help clean the air in their home. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say even better than parents picking up their students. Right now in Salt Lake County, most Salt Lake County school students have actual bus passes now where they can ride UTA, they can ride our system. So not only do their parents not have to drive to pick them up necessarily, they don't have to idle, which is super good. So also a thought.
And I might mention as well, and it seems like, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was UTA that 1 month out of the year, they partner with a lot of the businesses along the Wasatch Front. They do a program, I can't remember the name of it. We participated, I think it was called Skip the Trip or something. And there's a website they provide, and you log in and you encourage your employees to skip a trip of driving and either take public transportation or work from home or do whatever they can. It becomes a little competition between these businesses that had signed up for it along the Wasatch Front or were participating for the month, and the employees could go in and they could log, oh, well, I skipped this trip, it saved this much in emissions, and the company that had the most was given some sort of recognition. I can't remember if it was UTA that put that together or not, but I thought it was a fabulous idea that got people involved. UCare that did that. Yeah, it was a fabulous thing, and we participated. We didn't win this year, but we're going to shoot for it next year.
Oh, and I do want to just correct my statement. Instead of Salt Lake County, it's Salt Lake City School District. I apologize on that as far as the bus passes.
Let's see. What are some other things that people can do to improve air quality in the home or in your firm? And one, of course, is using solar panels. We've installed 26 solar panels on our rooftop, and it sure has cut our electricity bill. I don't know if it's good for the power companies, but it really helps out. At Provo Power, we are giving rebates to our users, our customers, who install heat pumps. Heat pumps are like a refrigerator going backwards. Instead of producing cold inside, it produces warm because you send it the other way. Heat pumps are a little more expensive than a regular furnace, but it's also just purely electric and not and doesn't use fuel to burn in your home and send it into the skies. So we've also had programs at Provo Power to take that old lawnmower you have, that old gas guzzling lawnmower, and we buy it from them, and then we give them a voucher to go out and buy an electric lawnmower, rechargeable electric lawnmower, and that saves a lot of bad stuff coming into the air. As you know, lawnmowers don't have any kind of emission control on the output of the gases that come out. And so we replaced most of our yard tools in our house. We don't have any gas yard tools anymore, and they work a lot better, and they're lighter, and they're really nice to know we're not polluting the air because of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point as far as turning in these old gas things and changing them to something that's a little bit more sustainable. A UTA initiative right now is by 2042, we're hoping to have about 40% of our fleet electrified. So the same thing, when we find systems that we can replace with better hybrid systems, things that get a better fuel economy, make more sense, we're trying to grow with technology as well. So yes, replace your lawnmowers or snow blowers, but also, make sure that, when you can, hold the companies that you work with, organizations that you support accountable to kind of keep that trend as well.
Well, and on that same note, I might just mention that we're working towards electrifying our fleet as well. We've started moving that direction, and we'll continue to do so. I'll speak a little bit, if you're okay. You asked about homes, what we can do in the home, and I'll speak a little bit to that. You've probably seen some of our commercials, the Thermwise commercials. You've maybe heard the slogan.
They're great.
Yeah. If you can serve, you can save. So if you can conserve energy, you can save money, but you can also save emissions, right? You can do both. And we have some great programs. We share a similar program with ground source heat pumps. We have insulation programs, weatherization programs, all sorts of energy efficiency programs that customers can take advantage of to help make their homes more energy efficient, tighter, make their appliances more efficient, things like that. The Utah Department of Air Quality, and this is interesting, it's something that I don't think most people know or understand. The Utah Department of Air Quality estimates that 4% of the inversion-causing emissions on a typical winter day come from natural gas being burned in the home. that number is matched by wood being burned in homes. Now, think about that for a second. We have millions of customers who burn natural gas in their homes and thousands of customers who may burn wood in their homes to heat their homes. And it has a similar effect on a typical winter day on inversion causing emissions. So one of the things we can do, and I know that many municipalities have put forth programs to incent people to take those wood burning stoves out of their homes. And I think that's a great way. We get good bang for the buck on that. I've seen programs as well where they change out, as you mentioned, gasoline powered equipment, lawnmowers, things like that for battery powered. And I think all those things can help.
I'm glad you mentioned the Utah, air quality. I was actually just reviewing their report and recommendations it came out with like last year. It was like 68 pages or something. And I love like even just how in this conversation, you're talking about what a company can do, what government can do, but then also what individuals can do. I think that is often, the helpless feeling that a lot of like the youth, young adults and stuff that we work with get really frustrated about is, we tell them a lot, you're the leaders of tomorrow, and they're like, yeah, but you're the leaders today. What are you doing, to fix it? But with that attitude also, a lot of times the whole responsibility of it maybe gets put like on government as opposed to what individual things, can you do? And having some of those individual things be measurable, like how much emissions am I really saving by not idling my car, or just having sometimes those things, hurt, the pocketbook. I really heard people talking about, do I really need to make that trip when gas prices went up, like really, really high. So I think really, focusing on these different areas and that air quality, report that the state has, it really does go through things that can be done at both like government, business, and individual level. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of times these things get so much work, so much attention, they get done, they get bound and beautifully put on a shelf somewhere, and then just really getting that information out to people that can use it and implement it, I think is great to see that at events like today.
Another thing that Provo Power has done, working with our power provider, Utah Municipal Power Authority, we're their biggest customer, but they built a solar farm down in just across the border south of Utah County in Mona, 540-acre solar farm that has large panels on it that follow the sun. When the sun comes up, they're this way, and then when the sun goes across the sky, the solar panels move to collect the most amount of sun. That has provided about 80 megawatts to the need for Provo Power to provide its customers. The other thing we've done is to provide about a 20-acre field where we have what we call community power, community solar, and there are 4 megawatts there that individuals can buy if they are in an apartment, for example. They can't put solar panels on their roof because the apartment wouldn't let them, or if they're in a situation where they, other reasons, can't put panels on their roof, they can buy into this community solar power and use that. Any other comments on what businesses could do to help clean the air? Do any of you know of a company, maybe we talked about that a little bit, where there's a really bad inversion day and where companies will say our employees shouldn't come to work on that day in their own cars and they can work at home? I know the state is doing that big time. They have work from home on any bad inversion days, and I'm sure other companies have done that as well. Any stories about that?
We do the exact same thing, yeah. So we track the air quality and the forecast for air quality, and within our own business on red days, we ask our employees who can to stay home, not come into work and just work from home.
Yeah, stay home or use transit. We have those signs up, hey, yellow, red air day tomorrow. Yeah, limit driving trips or use transit. I think that it makes a big difference. We do notice that bad air days, we do get bumps in ridership as far as people being a little bit more conscious of it. When you can see smog and issues with your air, I think it becomes something that's on the forefront of people's minds, so they try to make changes. Unfortunately, that's kind of when it becomes a little too late. The problem is already there. So if we can kind of think about it to prevent it as opposed to mitigating it, or to trying to fix it after the fact, I think we'd probably be in better shape.
Making places to have, electric cars chargeable, available at more businesses. I think that the state, I know there's been several like grant programs available to help subsidize, some of those things, just to make it more accessible and easier. I think is definitely something that businesses can contribute to.
It's been mentioned before in some of the other panels that the Provo City building that was just completed and occupied just a couple of months ago was built with the intent to make that a net zero energy building, and they achieved that. So you might talk to them. They got some special consultants in and that helped them design a building that would not use any net energy over time. They did all kinds of things, special insulation, special paint on the roofs. The air handlers were of a much more efficient kind, and they're using a lot of solar power from the Provo Power, where they get their electricity. So they really accomplished something good. It's really
Speaking of net zero structures, I might just mention we were able this year to get the Public Service Commission of Utah to approve a program for Dominion Energy customers. It's called Carbon Right. Some of you may have heard of it, maybe not. We're just getting ready to launch a big ad campaign about the program. But what that program does is, in essence, for a typical customer in the state of Utah, for $5 a month, that customer can offset all of the emissions from their natural gas usage. So we actually go out and we buy carbon offsets from either reforestation programs or landfill carbon capture programs that allow us to offset all of their emissions. And so we're really excited about that, the fact that for our customers who are especially sensitive to this and care about these air quality and environmental issues, that for as low as $5 a month for a typical customer, they can buy and become net zero, just like you talked about. The Provo City offices built their buildings to be net zero. So,
is that something that's available to businesses, homeowners, or?
Yes, absolutely. Homeowners and businesses, anyone in the state of Utah, it's available to them. And we've got a website, and we'll actually do some work to help them figure out exactly what their emissions would be and how many credits they might have to buy. If they're a business, obviously they're likely bigger than a residential home. A typical residential home, it might need more than $5 a month. But for $60 a year, you can be net zero if you're a typical home. We're pretty excited about it.
I'm excited about that. That's great. That's fascinating. I think too, just even listening, I don't know if any of you guys were in the mayor's panel, like right before, Mayor Lundberg was talking about, Lundberg of Linden, was talking about how there are going to be a beta program for the drone delivery with Walmart, which is, just we have to realize that there's solutions that we don't even see coming yet, right? We always hear the story of Henry Ford saying that if he would have asked the people of New York what they wanted for transportation, they would have said a faster horse, right? There's solutions that are coming that I think we just need to be open and curious and willing to explore about, how many trucks does that, take off the road, or how many trips to the grocery store does that save if we have, drones delivering groceries. Now, of course, then we need Kelly over here training all the drone operators, right? Co-Hem Tech. But again, that's another really great example of how economic development or workforce skills and preparedness can really help to alleviate some of the pressures on the environment with things that maybe we don't even see coming yet.
One of the big pressures that we have on the environment is the popularity of Utah for families to come back into. We want our kids to live here. We have 5 kids. They've lived all over the world, and guess where they live now? They all but one of them live in Utah. They want to come back home. Now, I've seen some projections from UDOT, and maybe you know about them, that in the next 10 or 15 years, in order to get the same speed of going from Salt Lake to Provo, you'd have to double deck the freeway, I-15. And think of the cars that would be on the freeway at that time. Have you seen data like that? We got it from Mare-Schaefer.
Yeah, we've seen talks and heard about stuff like that. I mean, I think everyone in the room does not want to double deck I-15. That would be problematic. There are definitely other solutions that people are looking at as far as making sure that traffic throughput stays better. A well-connected grid system within Utah Valley, better transit, better, and by that I mean, double tracking front runner, various things that we can do to improve. To completely rely on single occupancy vehicle as the population doubles just seems to be unsustainable. You can only loosen the belt so much before you have to just work out to lose some of it. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
But can we please get double-decker buses?
Right. I like that.
Double-decker buses, there we go.
I'll just make quickly one comment on that. I'm not an expert in the transportation side of things and what we would need freeways and that, but I do know that last year we added about 30,000 customers to our natural gas system here in the state, and we expect to do something similar this year. And that is just, it's unbelievable growth, and much of that growth has been in Utah County. I looked at our numbers in preparation for this, and our Utah County has grown to be almost 25% of our customer base, which is, when we do business from St. George to the top of Utah and then into Rock Springs, that's a big number. And I guess the point is that we're growing, and growth is coming, and it is coming fast, and we've got to figure out what innovative and creative things we can do to ensure that our air quality stays great and that Utah stays a place where your kids want to return to.
Yeah, and with that being said, just as far as the innovative thing, realistically, Utah County has one of the best BRT systems in the United States right now, if not the world. It's really an amazing system. It performs better than the top 3 bus routes in Salt Lake County combined. So you know it as UVX. It goes between Brigham Young University and UVU. It has 9,200 boardings within a month or a day. Mary, what is it? A day, exactly. So, that is a huge amount of boardings. So as far as being innovative, just think of the amount of traffic that relieves. And that is actually funded free by a congestion grant. Congestion and air quality grant. So, if you think about each of those 9,200 people driving a car through the heart of Utah County and what that would look like on your streets, it would be atrocious. So, yeah, looking at that stuff as a real success and just being able to kind of think towards the future about implementing more of those kind of systems it's really important.
And I would just add to that, especially being at a university, that we need to make sure that we're looking around and collaborating and looking at what solutions are being implemented in other parts of the world. For example, the conference that I just came from in the Netherlands, it was just all about building with nature. And some of the ideas, things that countries have been implementing in other places just to add bits of green space, we forget how much a single tree can help clean the air. Right? How much just a little garden spaces or pollinating places, even at, at some of their bus stations, I kid you not, at the top it said this is a bee-friendly bus stop, and at the top they had wildflowers planted, and it was just all this self-contained system. There's innovative, fun ideas happening already that I think we can build on if we do a better job with the communication that is facilitated by a world that's so connected that we can draw from, because these are not problems that just Utah is facing. These are issues that we have been facing, and here at a university we've got so many international students that have been being faced by so many countries, for a long time. You've been able to chew the air in China for a long time, and just a trip there is a really good way to motivate people to want to start a lot earlier.
I might make just one comment about something you said about you don't realize how much planting one tree can do for the environment. Now, as we've been talking today, I think it's important to note we've talked about air quality, but we've also talked about carbon emissions. And while they're intertwined, they are different things. Air quality and the smog that you see really is a result of SOx and NOx, which are precursors to what's called particulate matter, or PM 2.5. And nationally, when you hear talk about the air, they're talking often about carbon dioxide emissions. And when you hear about planting trees and things like that, it really helps with the carbon issues. But a point about the trees, many of the local governments have programs and goals to plant certain number of trees in their areas. I think, for example, of Salt Lake, I work in Salt Lake, so I'm very familiar with that. But Mayor Mendenhall in Salt Lake has a goal to plant, I believe it's 1,200 trees a year. And there are companies who have come in and provided funding to buy those trees, but they need volunteers. They need people to go out and plant those trees. And so, at Dominion, every year we run a volunteer day event where we go out and we try to plant 200 trees in a day. And so there are opportunities like that, ways that people can get involved. There are companies who are willing to support it by funding it, and I'd encourage everyone to think about ways they can get involved and be a part of it.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we are out of time, and I want to thank our panelists, Clint and Judd and Daniela, and they're sharing their experiences, and thank you very much for attending, and we'd love to talk to you afterwards if you have any comments to share with us, but thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Thank you very much. Thank you. It was.